Hey y'all, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is Carrie and my husband and I have been married for about 6 months now, and this channel is all about faith, family, and kids. So today we're going to be talking about kids. I'm just going to jump right into it. So my background with kids has been quite extensive. I've been babysitting since I was 14. More specifically, I want to talk about how I've managed groups of children, because I have worked with groups of children in an extended daycare that I worked at a school at during college. I have worked with a company called A Helping Hand. They do mostly military events, babysitting events, and I've managed groups of children in that setting. I have helped out in a camp before, several camps actually, where I managed groups of children. So I just wanted to give some tips on how to manage groups of children if you are babysitting or nannying and you have more than one child around the same age group, or if you're going to be a teacher, because I was also a teacher of a kindergarten class, a first grade class, and then a 12 to 18 month class. So I have had several opportunities to have experience with managing groups of children. Number one, routine. Routine is your best friend. It is naturally put into humans to be on some kind of routine. You most likely have some kind of routine to your life. As crazy as it may be, everyone has some kind of rhythm that their life follows and flows. A child, because they do not have the capacity to really think about taking care of themselves and designing their own schedule, a lot of times will just go on instinct and or what you have for them as far as a routine. So if you have a child on a routine, that child is instinctively going to feel safer and happier because they are doing something familiar, they are doing something that is in a routine, and it is just a natural instinct thing. Number two would be consistency. This extends from your snacks and eating time routines to your discipline routines to even how you get them out of bed in the morning, or if you're working at a camp, how you're walking from place to place. You have to have some kind of set expectation for them, for what you want them to do and how you're going to run that particular activity. So for example, if you're working at a camp and you want to travel with the kids from the swimming pool to the cafeteria, you can have them partner up and get in a line. And just tell them you expect them to stay in that line. Be consistent with getting on to them if they get out of the line. See how this builds structure and routine? These are things that are going to help you be able to manage the number of children that you have. This also can translate to nannying and babysitting. I have a certain way that I get the triplets I nanny out of their cribs every morning. I usually start at one end with one particular child, and I get her out and she goes to the bathroom, because she knows that when they get up, they go to the potty and they undress themselves. These babies are 2.5 years old. They had their birthday in January, so not quite 2.5 actually, but they are getting there. They're just about 2.5 years old. So they know how to take off their PJs, take off their diapers, sit on the potty. And they've got that routine down. So I take them out one at a time and they all go do that. And then I go ahead and get all of their clothes together and their diapers together, and I put them in the same spot every day. The children also know to put their PJs in a certain spot and put their diapers in a certain spot. So I have them put their diapers up and out of the way, off the floor, onto the counter. Okay, y'all, I have to get a pillow. My back was killing me. So I have them put their diapers up and into the sink. Actually, it's usually dry most of the time. A lot of times if they just put it on the counter, that's fine too, because I clear them off in a few seconds. And then they put their PJs on top of a dresser in their room. When it's time to get dressed, we have another routine. I call them one at a time, and I put their diaper on as they come to me, and then I put their shirt over their head. I've tried a couple times just to see if I handed them the shirt, what they would figure out. And they're not quite at that age yet or stage yet where they can successfully put on a shirt without help. However, they do put on a shirt without help once I put the head hole over their head. They're usually pretty good about putting their arms in. They will sometimes get frustrated about pulling the shirt down over their belly, but they have just learned that I, instead of doing it for them, will guide their hands to do it. Or if I think they're particularly frustrated, then I will just make sure that they're asking, please help. Because at that age, all they know to do is to scream, squeal, cry out, help. But they don't say the words help. A lot of times they're just doing the crying part because that's all they know up to this point. So I am working with them particularly on using their words. When they realize that they can communicate in other ways, they're going to be much happier. They're going to be able to work with you more. So then I have their pants on the floor. They go to their pants and I'm teaching them to put the tag of their pants on the floor. And I always touch the tag with their finger and say tag floor or tag on the floor. And then they know, okay, this is the right way that my pants are right side up. I can slide my feet in. It is still pretty often that they will accidentally slip both feet into one leg hole, especially now that we're getting to summer and using shorts. That's a little bit more confusing for them as far as where their legs go. But again, this is another thing where I let them figure it out for the most part. So if they get two legs in one leg hole and they stand up and try to pull the shorts or pants up, I have them sit back down. This is the sign language for sit back down. And then I help them take the pants off and reset. And I let them do it again and let them try. And sometimes I'll point to their legs and say, this leg goes in this right here, and this leg goes in this part right here. And I will show them kind of how it goes in. They can all pull their shorts up once they have their feet through. So they know, like, once they get their feet through, they stand up and then they can pull their shorts or pants up by themselves. It's pretty rare now that I have to actually help them. I will say that when they do struggle, I just have them point to where the waistband is at and pull right there. Because a lot of times they just want to grab at the fabric and pull that up. Because it's a little bit easier for them to do that. And then it doesn't quite pull the waistband up as well. So that's just an example of a routine that I have set. And I have little routines like that all throughout the day. And they know that I'm going to use sign language as much as possible. That's going to incorporate into our third tip. Speaking with purpose and speaking softly. At any age, they're going to need communication, but especially with the younger ones and especially in a large group. Whenever you talk, you want your children, the group in your children, to be paying attention. And the less that you talk, the more valuable your talk is. So a lot of times when I was in groups of children, in order to get their attention, sometimes I would just raise my hand. Sometimes I would do a countdown, because when I had 25-year-olds in a class, they weren't all paying attention and I'd be sitting there forever. Now, a lot of times when you're in a group of kids, they're old enough to talk, then they're like, shh, to all their friends. But, so I started doing like a countdown where I would just do a countdown. Sometimes I'll actually do the sign language countdown on one hand. They knew which one was which, and I could get a whole room completely silent just by not even talking. If you're trying to yell at the children to get in line, if you're trying to yell at the kids to be quiet, like, that's not going to work. You not being quiet will not help your kids be quiet. So by being quiet, I always make sure that I'm speaking softly, or else I use sign language when I'm in a routine. When we're outside of routine and it's just play, talk all you want. But in a routine, you want the child to be able to be comfortable with what you're doing and not distracted by what you're saying. So unless your words are going to be something you're going to say every single time in that routine, I suggest that you don't talk or use sign language. So like I said, for that routine with the kids in the morning, I talk very little. I say good morning, And a lot of times they're at this age where they want to make sure they're doing everything right, but to the extent that they already know what to do and they're still questioning it, because they just want that feedback. So a lot of times they'll ask me, diaper up here, and of course they're not quite talking yet, but I know what they're saying, and they're verbal, but they're not clear words. And if you have a little one, or if you've worked with little ones, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So a lot of times they're asking me about the routines. They want to make sure that they're still in place. And it does make a difference when you're a nanny, because obviously the parents are going to have different routines from you. So when they're still really young, that is going to maybe not confuse them if you've been doing your routine long enough, but it is going to kind of challenge them as far as like, okay, where are my boundaries? Like, I need to be reminded of them again. But as far as routines go, it's almost been a year of me working with these little ones. So if they're still asking me where their diaper goes, I just have stopped answering, because a lot of times they just want to have that affirmation, and it's not helping the routine, it's slowing down the routine. And it's almost like they love the interaction with me so much, because they're just, they're on the brink of talking sentences. So when they've got this vocabulary, they just want to use it. So I try to discourage them using that vocabulary during times where it's not really necessary. Like asking if they need to put their diaper on top of the counter when they know that that's where it goes. Or asking, go sit on the potty after they've already undressed and taken their diaper off. They know they need to go sit on the potty. And so a lot of times when I am just silent, they go ahead and do it anyways. And it actually helps not to even make eye contact during that time, unless they're still staying there after a few minutes. Then you make eye contact. You can use your motions to go sit in the toilet. They know, they just are testing their limits. They're testing their boundaries, but they're also, like I said, they are loving that interaction. They're at that stage. So when you have a large group of children, or even a small group of children, communication is important in the fact that if you are always talking, you will not be heard. So learn some sign language, baby sign language, if you're working with little ones. If you're working with older ones, silence is the biggest thing that you can do. And this is something I even try to incorporate in discipline. And I will say that's probably my fourth tip for working with a group of children. You cannot work with a group of children and have no discipline, aka structure. There has to be some structure involved, because if not, you are going to have chaos on your hands. So discipline does not have to be a negative word per se. There can be positive discipline that is enforced. You just have to have discipline that you're comfortable with enforcing consistently. And if you're nannying or you're babysitting, this means collabing with the parents of the children. If you're working in a preschool or a school or a camp, this means collabing with your supervisors, what they want you to do for certain situations. And this is something that you have to come up with yourself to some extent, but those over you, those who are your bosses, they would help you. Now, if you're just a parent and you've got a group of kids and you're watching this, obviously you set the limits here. But what you want to do is make sure that any discipline that you carry out is something you've either seen the parents do themselves, or you've talked with the parents and say, hey, is this okay? Hey, how do you want me to handle this situation? Now, if you are in a setting with a group of children in a school or a preschool or a daycare, something like that, then your supervisor actually overrides the parents. The parents are paying for their child to go there, so you're going to listen to whatever their supervisor wants you to do as far as discipline goes. The parent does not have that decision-making capability. If they don't like what's being done as far as discipline goes, they go somewhere else. Just going to plug that one in there, because a lot of teachers can get caught up in doing what one parent wants and then what another parent wants for their child, and they're trying to handle so many different parents' requests for how they want their child handled that it's just chaos. You've got to have some kind of structure. All the children need to know, if I do this thing, there is going to be this consequence. So, for example, if one of the kids I'm nannying throws a toy, I immediately say, no, we do not throw toys at our friends. I usually give them one warning because of how young they are. Now, the oldest is 4 years old, so if he's throwing toys, he definitely knows better, and I'll set him in timeout for a few minutes. But eye contact. You've always got to have eye contact in your discipline, no matter what age, no matter how many kids. Eye contact is key. Second thing is how close you are to that child. It is difficult to discipline a child across the room if you are also trying to handle a lot of other kids. I would suggest get as close as you can to that child, make eye contact, and the third thing is get on their level. When you are on their level, eye contact, close to them, that is just assuming authority. They kind of just know, okay, this is not where I can do what I want. This person cares about me, they're setting limits, and they are here in my space. So the fourth thing I would say is, especially when you're that close, not exactly whispering, but definitely speaking in slow, gentle, firm tones. And yes, gentle and firm sound like they are opposites, but they are not. For example, if I'm getting onto a child, because I have them come over to me usually after they sit in timeout, and I will say, we do not throw toys at our friends. Yes, ma'am. Now, I put that yes, ma'am at the end. That's a personal thing. I do that because it causes the child to respond. When they do that, it actually activates something in their brain. Every time you say something, you are activating a part of your brain that enables the memory. So you actually instill the memory more in that child if you are having them respond. Even if for some reason they weren't listening when you were saying do not throw toys, by them saying yes ma'am, it's like their brain kind of picks up what they were only like half paying attention to. So whether you use the phrase yes ma'am or not, it's not detrimental, but it will actually help you if you have them say something. Just make it consistent. You have to have consistency because they are children. So in order for them to remember something, they have to have repetition. Repetition is the key to learning. If they do not have repetition, they will not learn. And if they do not have consistency, then they don't have repetition. If you do a different punishment every time, or if you do not follow through on your punishments, for example, if you let a child throw a toy, okay, and you say, just don't do that next time, honey. Well, then the next time that they throw a toy, you're like, okay, go sit in timeout. And then the next day, they throw a toy, and you're like, in a bad mood that day, so you're like, go sit in timeout. You're only going to confuse the child. So the consistency extends to what kind of voice you use for different kinds of things. So, for example, if a child is in danger, I'm going to yell at them, okay? If they're about to step into a hole, or if they're about to run out into a road, I am going to yell to get their attention. All other times, I'm speaking softly but firmly. When you yell, you actually distract a child from what you're saying, and they are focused on the fact that they're being yelled at. And a lot of times, even if they're older, it intimidates them. So then they start feeling very emotional about that, and they're not paying attention to what you're yelling at them about. All they remember from that is that you yelled at them. They will not remember what you yelled at them about. So if you're upset, you have got to talk in quiet tones. Now let's say that you have a child that is scream crying, literally scream crying. You cannot talk to them in this state. Imagine for a second if you were the one who was so upset that you were crying and screaming at the same time. You're not going to listen to a word somebody's trying to yell at you or talk to you about. You can say a phrase over and over again to a child that is in that state, and they're no clue. None. So first things first, you have got to get the child to calm down. And this is just kind of like a sneak peek for my tips on that. But personally, with the children that I nanny, they have learned that when I say, that's enough, very quietly, again, I'm using my techniques of getting close to them, getting on their level, looking in their eyes, and I say, that's enough. I am not kidding you when I tell you it is a snap of the fingers response. Now for the 15-month-old, depending on the situation, we're still working on it. All the others, 2.5-year-olds, they can be mid-scream cry. They can be legitimately crying, tears coming down their face even, upset about something. And if I need them to calm down so I can talk to them about whatever's going on, that's enough. Now, if they're crying because they fell down and got hurt, they need to cry. And listen, children need an emotional release just like you and I do. Sometimes, girls, you know it. You just need to cry. And kids are the same way. They just need that emotional release sometimes. But there's a difference between needing an emotional release and scream crying angrily. And because you have an attitude and because you're upset about something not going your way. These babies don't know how to act. You have to teach them how to act. You have to teach them how to respond. So when that happens and they're having those feelings of, hey, you took my toy, talking to a friend, my friend took my toy, they're going to be upset about that. And all they know to do is scream cry. So by you leading them and guiding them and teaching them that there's other ways to handle their emotions, they are not only a happier child, but they're more self-controlled and more independent because they've been able to make critical thinking choices. Critical thinking is when they size up a situation and are able to use their own thoughts, training, guidance, whatever have you, to discern the situation and react accordingly. A child without critical thinking skills is going to immediately cry, scream at anything that comes up. But if you have a child who switches over to whining every single time that they are told to do something they don't want to do, whether they're told to take a nap, whether they're told to pick up toys, whatever it is, if that child immediately goes to whining, that is because that is what they know and they have not been told differently. So for example, the kids that I nanny, they don't whine for me. That's because I set the precedent. And if they try to whine, that's what gets addressed. So for example, if I'm trying to get a child to pick up toys and they're whining about it, what I don't do is I don't address the not picking up toys. I address the whining. Because when you address the attitude first, the actions follow behind. So for example, if your child's whining about picking up toys, you say, we do not use that tone of voice. Or I can say, no whining, we do not whine. I like to use the word we, because then that child understands that as adults, we don't need to do that either. We don't need to whine. We don't hit our friends. I use the term we because we do not hit our friends. So when they understand that it's not just you telling them what to do all the time, it's a action that a big grown-up doesn't do either, that in their mind, again, it is all a mental understanding of their surroundings and their environment. Once they understand that, it actually does help as well with what they do and how they respond. Back to the example. So with the child that is whining, they're going to sit in timeout for whining. And when they're done, then they pick up the toys. Now listen, if there's whining again, be consistent. They go back in timeout or whatever kind of discipline structure you have set up. But if you never address the whining, that is the only way they know how to respond to something. They have to get in trouble for the whining or they're not going to move on from that. They're going to resort to that. It's almost like if you had a favorite blanket or a child's favorite blanket, they're going to resort to that for comfort. Children are going to resort to whatever they know and are familiar with and are comfortable with. So I want the children to know that when they're with me, they need to be comfortable with not whining, using their words, and expressing being upset about something in other ways. Every day of the week, I have them pick a face, they call it. I have little faces and they put it on a felt board and it says how they're feeling that day. The 2.5-year-olds, they have no clue what they're picking. They just see these fun faces. The 4-year-old gets it a little bit more. So oftentimes, if one of the 2.5-year-olds picks something that's an angry face, or a sad face, or an upset face, or a scared face, these are things I address every single time. So I say it's okay to be angry. We can have those feelings sometimes. We can be really upset about something, but what's important is we don't stay angry and that we get happy. They're not really going to understand feelings in detail, so I keep it pretty simple. You obviously know your child if you're a parent. You know your child if you've been a nanny of several for a while. In a group setting, you've got to keep consistency with whining. You can't let one child whine and another child not, just because you may be annoyed more with that child. Any of the children whining, that's got to go, because a child whining means he does not respect you. And again, this goes back to just what they know and what they're comfortable with. But if you instill that they have to respect you from the beginning, which, by the way, babysitters and nannies, you have that one up. Parents, it's a little bit harder for you. And I'm not a parent yet myself, so I really can't even be talking in that respect. I like to keep it to nannies, teachers, things like that. But I can imagine that living every single day of your life, just as you would and without a kid, and you suddenly have a child, well, you're not going to necessarily think structure, think discipline, think of ways to guide my child. Like, you're going to think those randomly and abstractly, but as a nanny, that's like my daily part of my life. Like, that's my daily job. It's my job to create a loving and warm environment that is safe, happy, and fun for children. So creating that environment means I have to have structures, I have to have limits, I have to have boundaries. And when you do that, you set those structures, set those boundaries, the child can grow. So thank y'all for watching. I'm going to be uploading more tips in the coming weeks, and I will see you guys next time.